everybody, or should I say Dia Gwith, Richard will show me up, also from Ireland. My name is Susie Cullinan and I am the Implementation Manager in SETU for Pure. So I actually manage the Research Systems Support Unit. And it was actually Monique from Elsevier who contacted me back in May and asked me would I give a joint presentation, but you can see he's not on the stage with me, so unfortunately you have to deal with just me today. Unfortunately he couldn't make it to the conference. But he had a really interesting topic, so I'm here to present the topic today for him. Actually, my title of the topic wasn't there actually on the sign. So it's actually from admin to asset, using Pure to build and show our value. So what my presentation is focused on is how we can shift the way our roles are seen within our organisation. When Monique contacted me, he was saying that he was concerned that the Pure administrators were actually often the unsung heroes behind such an amazing system. That we, ensure research visibility, open access compliance, and we're, the data-driven reporting comes from the work that we do. And he believed that our value goes way beyond the tech support, the admin support that we give to such a system, that it's strategic, it's measurable, it's institutionally visible, and we need to ensure that the way we speak about our roles, the way we describe what we do, needs to reflect the importance of our jobs within our organisation. So this session will focus on how to elevate your role within your own individual organisation. But first of all, a little bit about me. As I said, I work in Southeast Technological University. I used to actually work in Waterford Institute of Technology. And if anyone heard my talk yesterday, we merged with the Carlow Institute of Technology. There was a big movement to become technological universities in Ireland. So we had, I think, 11 institutes of technology, and a lot of them merged. And we have 5 technological universities in Ireland. And I used to manage the research support unit. So I was responsible for all research funding applications, awards, projects, all the research metrics and reporting, and life had just become too complicated. We had multiple different data sources, and pulling all the information together into kind of reporting was becoming a lot more complex. So in 2017, I started, so Richard, I worked with the HEA net for 18 months actually to put that HEA framework in place, that procurement framework. And we invited in all the possible providers of CRIS solutions across the world in to present. And then they had to tender for it, and there were 6 providers. And now I think it is 14 of the Irish HEIs now have Pure. So we were the first to pull off the framework in Ireland at Waterford Institute of Technology at the time. TU Dublin followed quite shortly after us. And then when it came to around 5 organisations in Ireland, we set up the Irish Pure User Group, which myself and Owen co-chair. And I agree, the learnings that we have from each other is just phenomenal, because CRIS systems were new to Ireland. Now, we didn't have an older version of a RIM system or anything like that in SETU. We had databases, and it just wasn't really fit for purpose, because the amount of reporting, as we all know, has really just grown over the last few years. So yeah, that's been my kind of journey. And then actually during COVID, I decided to do, because I've been a project manager for years and years, but when I was 20 or whatever, and I went to college, originally it was human resource management was my background. So eventually did a master's in project and program management around the time that I was starting to roll out all of these systems. So it was a great benefit at the time. And that stakeholder engagement piece that the guys talked about earlier was one of the key kind of learnings. Is getting that engagement very early on in the days was critically important. Okay, so moving into the presentation then, when myself and Seth were having our meetings about this presentation, we were looking at kind of like the perception versus reality. That was the key problem we were looking at. And the perception is that many of us are seen as just admin or as technical support. And that was what Seth had kind of gathered from the conversations he was having with Pure implementation managers and the senior technical officers who were implementing Pure, and that they were responsible for data entry and compliance policing. But while these are, critically important areas, they're not very strategic at the end of the day. And the reality is that we are strategic enablers of things like open access, open research, planning, and impact. We're drivers of visibility, compliance, and reporting, and collaborators in shaping a research culture. And that's critically important as well, to change the culture of the organisation. I was saying yesterday that we did a research culture survey recently, and I really applaud you guys for the amount of collaboration and the emails and stuff like that. But in our survey, it came back saying, stop trying to push Pure on us sometimes. So it's a fine balance between, encouraging and supporting and really showing the value of a system like Pure versus annoying people, with too much communication around it. So you really have to be really good at negotiating. But I believe that there is a real kind of a gap between what we do and what we are sometimes perceived to do. So let's have a little poll in a second and look at how do you describe your role to others. And if you choose the one that best fits you, best fits how you actually describe your role to others. Yeah, these are the ones that come up a lot of time when I'm talking to other, even the iPug users and people like that. They're not very strategic. It's what we do on a day-to-day basis, but they're not actually, the way we should describe our role when it comes to when we're speaking to, the senior executive teams and people around the organisation. So I suppose that's what I want to talk about today. So, and this kind of statement here, if we want to change perceptions, we have to change the language we use to describe our roles. And that really gets to the heart of what I want to discuss. So the way in which we describe our role, both formally and informally, really does have an impact on the way others actually perceive us. Often we default to operational language because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We're building a system, we're ensuring the data quality, we're working on data and data sets and improving systems all of the time. And while these are critically important, they don't really tell the full story of how important our roles are within our organisations. And instead of saying, you manage the RIM system, say that you're responsible for the development of research infrastructure that supports research visibility, compliance and strategic decision making, because it's that data that you're presenting at, to governing body or that you're giving to your VPs of research to present, that's feeding into the decisions that are made at organisational levels. So it's a subtle shift, but it's one that I believe is a powerful one. And we need to ensure that we're telling the story that aligns with the language of our institutions around impact, enablement, and alignment with strategic and institutional goals. And this is where Pure becomes more than a system. It becomes a platform for storytelling, for insights, and for demonstrating how our work drives value across the university. And we'll get practical about this in the next few slides. But just first of all, let's look at why this really matters. So I suppose from my perspective and in my conversations with Monique, when our work is understood, we can miss out on recognition. Our teams may be under-resourced, and that's one thing from talking to an awful lot of people at this conference. The teams are under-resourced. And even at home in my own university, and when I'm talking to iPug members, it's like, when will Pure be rolled out and you can kind of go back to the normal day job? Whereas this is a massive, massive system that people need to, and I'd say we're using probably 20% of what this can actually do for us. Those system integrations, all of the aspects. Now, while we have the Pure portal and we have the award management module, now we'll have the CVs, the lovely templates are there now that we can start creating, but I still think management are waiting for it to be rolled out and self-managing at some stage. So it can affect our own career growth and recognition within the organisation. But when we shift the narrative and unlock our strategic influence, we can unlock our strategic influence, cross-functional collaboration and research impact at a scale. So I suppose my message is that we can change this perception by changing the way we tell our story and demonstrate our true value. So let's bring this a little bit closer to home. So before we implemented Pure at SETU, we had really, disconnected data sources, manual compliance checks, really difficulties in promoting researcher profiles because they had a stagnant kind of staff profile that didn't link anywhere, didn't go to their publications. And there was limited trust in data for decision making because it was being, taken from so many different places. So we really did need a platform, or more than a platform, or more than a tool, we needed a platform. So the system was only part of the challenge, that the real challenge was alignment, processes and culture. Again, the word culture comes in all over the... So at SETU then, after Pure implementation, like with most organisations here, we really do have a centralised and trusted research data, so a centralised source of all of that data. It's so much easier to track things like open access and compliance. I remember trying to do an audit during COVID times and we didn't have Pure. It was nearly impossible to track all of this compliance, when various things were signed off on within the organisation. Researchers' profiles are now live and discoverable, which is wonderful. We don't have many as UL, but we have nearly 500 profiles, but we'd be a lot smaller organisation. And we have better reporting for strategic planning, which is critically important these days. So Pure really became our foundation for advocacy and engagement. And more importantly there, it is a platform for institutional planning and for strategy, not just for data storage. And across the IRIS sector, I see the same things. People are aligning all of their research to the SDGs, which we never had a platform to do that before. And that's critical important, especially for SETU, who is a very newly young established organisation or a university who wants to get into the ranking. So it's really important that we're able to track and monitor that now. We use it now to create institutional dashboards across the sector and to track engagement, impact and collaborations. So it really is, in Ireland especially, becoming a sector-wide research asset. So this is something that I came up with in SETU, and it looks at what's your vibe. So when you consider this to communicate your value internally, think of these four words. So your visibility, are your efforts seen within your organisation? The impact, what changes because of your work within your organisation? Then B is for buy-in, so who supports you and why? Do you have the VP for strategy, your VP for research supporting the work that you're doing? And E is for elevation then, so how do you contribute to strategic goals within your organisation? It's a simple way to describe your value within your organisation. And considering your vibe helps you to think and talk about your value in a strategic way, as opposed to talking about the data that you manage and maintain. So these are, I won't go through all of these, but just to kind of, you'll have the notes afterwards. So again, your visibility, the metrics that you can look at there, is there active researcher profiles? Is the Pure data used on public websites like the guys from UL have? And is it used in reports and communications with stakeholders? The impact then, do ye have improved open access compliance? Because you can do a benchmark now as to how many of your publications are in open access journals or whatever. And has that been improving? And show the graphs of all of that. Researcher engagement with the system. Yeah, is there more people engaging with the system on a regular basis? The buy-in then. So what support are you getting from leaders and from the champions? I think when all of us were doing our implementation with our implementation manager, the importance of those people advocating for Pure the whole time was really important. And then elevation then, so is Pure data used in KPIs and rankings, for information, for funding bids? So it's just, how does your work support all of these strategic goals? And that's just how I use the example to actually showcase the value of the work of our team in SETU, that we have, nearly the 500 researcher profiles, and we're a small organisation. There's only around 600 active researchers or research staff within SETU. So while we're not at 95% compliance rate yet, we're definitely getting there. We have improved open access engagement, as I mentioned. We do have senior leadership buy-in and support. Every time there's data required, every time they come to me to get the information from Pure in order to ensure that it's accurate, it's correct, it's up to date. And then the elevation, so, making sure that I use Pure data then to support institutional KPIs, annual reporting, external audits and so forth. And we really feed it back into the faculty level then when they're actually looking at assessments at a faculty level. Now, that was supposed to be a word cloud, so you can actually ignore that one there. So the kind of coming to the end of the presentation here, the question that I ask is, how do you influence strategically? And a lot of times we're asked for data, but don't just report the data, translate it into stories, show how Pure supports national strategic policy or strategies or policies or EU directives. Use Pure in metrics, in presentations to leadership, and always show them where the data is coming from, and offer insights, not just reports. Don't just report the data, make sure that you show the stories behind it, and position your team as solution providers, not just system owners, because that's what we can be seen as. They're the people responsible for managing Pure, but we're so much more than that. And then finally, just some practical tips on how to build your strategic visibility within your organisations. Speak in terms of institutional goals, not just systems or data. Use Pure data in the executive dashboards, and I've seen a lot of that over the last few days, the wonderful Power BI reporting and stuff like that that's showcased to the senior management team. Offer internal training sessions that focus on benefits, and I spoke a lot about that yesterday. In order to change the culture within your organisation, you speak about the benefits of Pure as opposed to, we have to get this data in order to be able to report on it. Highlight researcher success stories enabled by your work. That's one thing that I found really, really worked well in SETU. One of our researchers, when we merged with an organisation, with Carlow Institute of Technology, we didn't know the other people's research expertise and stuff like that. So one of 3 individual Carlow researchers found our Waterford researcher on the Pure portal, and she then had 3 successful SETU PhD scholarship applications because they found her expertise, and she had a really rich profile and her research was very interdisciplinary. So as a result of that, showcasing things like that in your newsletter, in your Pure newsletter, is really beneficial. And really do align your messaging with strategic documents, strategic plans, KPIs and open access mandates. They're simple action, but they really do have high impact. So my final slide at my last 2 minutes. So that brings me back to the original idea of this presentation, and I hope I did Monique proud, saying that you are the asset. We're not admin, you are the asset, that you're not just maintaining a system, you're enabling the future of research at your organisation. So your role is critically important. It's not just admin, as I said, it's strategic. And Pure gives you the data, but you guys are the people who bring the value. So let's change the perception, starting with how we tell our own story.